listeners. Welcome to our next episodes of the series of trends. We are going through a series in which we want to talk you through what we have seen across our trends from already 2011 on. And as you can imagine, 2011 up till now has created a lot of new things in the world of human capital and in the world of organization. And today we have a closer look at the long-lived trend of organization. I am Tom Alstein. I am the Global Organization Design Leader of Deloitte, and I'm here with my dear colleague, David Mallon. So hopefully you enjoy today's episode.
Thank you, Tom. I'll start to dive into a little bit of the backstory and some of the trends that we've looked at over the years. As introduced, I'm David Mallon. I'm one of the authors for our annual Global Capital Trends study. I've been part of the Trends program for most of its existence, so I'm thrilled to get a chance to sort of look back. And when I do look back at all the trends that have touched on organization, so not surprisingly, you see kind of an encapsulation of just sort of the broader discourse in the world about sort of how we organize ourselves. Why do we group people in the way we do to get work done? If you think way back, I think it's actually might be more useful to even do a little bit of a history lesson here. If you think way back from the Industrial Revolution to Frederick Taylor, Max Weber, post-World War II, all the way to the 80s, this question of organization has really always been about scale, decisions at scale, which lead us to think about hierarchies. Hierarchies are actually very good at scale. They're efficient. That makes some sense. And so for much of that history, as organizations have gotten larger and more sophisticated and more complicated, we end up with just sort of larger hierarchies. And that worked well when we're mostly a pre-information society, pre-kind of big global economic environment. But by the 80s, you start to see the cracks. You start to see, and with it, the studying of organizations explicitly as a discipline. Some of you may know of Jay Galbraith and his STAR model, for example. Others start to define the field. I think it's actually not coincidental that at the same time, we were also starting to study at organizational cultures, Edgar Schein and so on. And you see leaders and businesses for the first time talking about organization and op model, org design as differentiator. The thing was the marketplace was asking new things. It was asking organizations to go faster, to be able to not just innovate, but to also maintain their kind of revenue generating cash cow businesses at the same time. The workforce is starting to ask for new things: agency, experience, well-being, DE&I, a relationship with their organization that wasn't just about compensation or remuneration. So by the 90s, we start to see experiments in how we organize. We start to see academic research connecting innovations in mathematics to organizations like chaos theory and complexity and complex adaptive systems. In the 2000s, we see the rise of social media and particular tools teaching us things about ourselves that we didn't already know, like the wiki, which was something that academic departments used, and now suddenly companies are using it, and it was helping them to realize, oh, wait a minute, information flows in networks, and that means something. And that leads us then to the 2010s, which is where our trends start. And not surprisingly, we see this explosion of different ways to organize ourselves. We see Enterprise 2.0 and teal organizations and holacracies and teams of teams. And you see new tools to look at all of this, like organizational network analysis. And so that's where you see in our trends, you see that pick up, you see that resonate. You see us talking in 2011 about from ladder to lattice. We talked about the push towards flatter, more interconnected structures in organizations. In 2013, we start talking about organizational acceleration, which was really about bringing science to change programs. So how do we use science to make change programs more locally relevant, more precise? In 2016, we talk about the rise of teams, specifically calling out how most work happens in teams and work groups and organizations, and whether maybe the organization was never really the hierarchy we thought it was. In 2017, we talk about an organization of the future, which is really about bringing adaptability into the scaffolding, the DNA of the organization. So you don't always have to break the organization to actually change it. Fast forward to now, and most recently, you've seen in our trends, we've talked about boundarylessness. And that was sort of a code word for some of the very basic definitions that we've used to talk about organizations. What is a job? What is a worker in a specific organization? Some of these things are beginning to get fuzzy and fade away. And as our 2023 trend, activating the future of the workplace, talked about, what is even the workplace going forward, and how is that maybe an input to the design of work? It's fair to say that some of those more radical work organization experiments may not necessarily have always played out in the way we thought, but they've been really useful in helping us to disaggregate or unpack what it means to even design an organization. And it's a whole lot more than structure. And when we look at some of those constructs separately, decision rights, for example, and we don't assume them, that's how organizations seem to have finally been able to start to maybe have a bit of local relevancy and speed and global scale at the same time. Going forward, I think we're going to start to look at questions like, well, what exactly is a manager? Why do we have managers? What are some of the other anchoring points that are going to define that relationship between workers and organizations? But I'm curious now, Tom, as somebody who deals with this every day and works with clients all around the world on this question, where do you think this is going? What do you think we're going to be some of the fundamental questions we ask ourselves about organizations in the next 10 to 15 years?
Yeah, no, thank you, David, and thank you for the interesting journey across the history of organization, and also our last 13 years of trend reports. Really interesting to hear that kind of in one flow. So thank you very much for that. And if I look back, indeed, as the last 10 years, but also very much look forward into the next 10 years. I am really fascinated by a true evolution that we see and that will further continue, right? I think traditionally we have looked at organizations as quite mechanical constructs. So back in the days, we talked about governance, control, processes, and other kind of structures. And I think we start to acknowledge more and more that organizations, in essence, are next to a kind of a mechanical construct, also are very much a social construct. So we get more to themes around, okay, how do I create belonging? How do I create growth? How do I get the most out of the human potential I have? And also, as part of that living construct, how do we constantly evolve? Because it's never fixed. And that's what you see really happening in the market today, right? A lot of organizations still, indeed, as you pointed out, going with kind of Taylorism oriented models that are actually from the 1920s, right? And now start to acknowledge that, hey, we really need to see the organization in a more holistic way. Another big thing that you see is actually has become a common practice, but will be even more vital to the organizations going forward, is the essence of multidisciplinary working, right? We've called it out in our trends a lot through the teams construct. But what you see is that back in the days, things were maybe a little bit more predictable. Industries stayed within the boundaries. Some functional areas stayed within the boundaries. But currently, a lot of the challenges that organizations and units and individual teams are facing are pretty much always multidisciplinary in nature. So how do you organize for that? How do you connect the right people with the right expertise in the right mix at the right time? So that team-based working and then doing that in a flexible and right place, right time kind of matter is crucially important also going forward. So I think the other trend that really kind of aligns to that is also the trend about adaptable, flexible. I think we've gone through the wave of agile, right? We've seen a pendulum swing a little bit back into, okay, not everything should be agile, but responsiveness and being able to respond to my environment in a more continuous and more quicker fashion is going to be important. And traditionally, organizations are set up in too much silos and too much hierarchy layers, really, so that information has to travel too much, both vertically and horizontally. So moving into more flatter organizations where decisions can be made more quicker and easier and more on the spot is going to be important. And I think another thing that you also see in the trends coming through and also will be important going forward is then the terminology around empowerment, right? And empowerment obviously and often has a little bit of a flavor, okay, that's nice for the employees, but it is also a business necessity. right? The olden days where the intelligence sat on top and those smart, mostly men made the decisions is far gone, right? The actual intelligence should sit really close to the process, really close to the worker, really close to the customer, and they should be able to act on that intelligence. So it's empowerment and availability of data to make the calls is going to be crucially important. And then maybe if you allow me one other like final trend I really see, especially in the world of organizational design, is that we have always used the word design, right, in our craft. But the actual question that a designer should always ask themselves first is who is actually the user of my design? And I think for a very long time, we have seen management as the user of the organization, which then ends up in control mechanism, governance, etc. But I think we start to get to the acknowledgement that the true user of the organization is the worker. So how do we optimize for the worker, for the performance, for the belonging, for the potential? And I think that angle is going to be massively important going forward as well. And then obviously there is also a little bit of a turning point to all this kind of flexibility, right? So I would not be surprised if also some form of stability will come a little bit back into fashion, because we do need to acknowledge that we have quite a diverse workforce, right, with different needs for stability, adaptability. So also that segmentation of the workforce and who needs what to truly perform will be probably another thing that would be quite important into the next couple of years. So yeah, that's a little bit of a journey across my thoughts around where we are and where we move towards.
So what I'm excited most about all the things you just raised is I see a thread of really not trying to, and this seems to show up in so many places these days, not try to find necessarily better answers, but to ask better questions and to unpack the questions that we're asking. Because for example, when it comes to empowerment, if that question is just really about authority, it takes us one direction. If it's really about, well, we're going to need to go out and be able to make decisions quickly. So how do we agree to this, to a common purpose, but how do we let the local react to the conditions on the ground? That's us just asking better questions. When we think about your notion, sort of balancing agility and stability and flexibility, it really is just about asking better questions. And that I'm excited to see how this all plays out. And I'm sure you all out there watching this today are probably equally as well, our listeners. We thank you for joining us here today, and we do invite you to check out our 14th annual report set to launch in March of 2025, as mentioned. Sign up at the link below, and we'll send you a note as soon as it publishes. And be sure to check into some of our other Trends of Trends installments leading up to March. Thank you for listening, and bye for now.